The rain battered the windows of the Willow Creek Public Library, a relentless drumbeat that drowned out the world outside. I, Marcus Tate, 25, stood behind the circulation desk, my fingers drumming nervously on the counter as the fluorescent lights flickered above. Something about tonight felt electric, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for a spark to ignite. The library was nearly empty, save for a few stragglers hunched over books or laptops. Willow Creek, a sleepy town in upstate New York, wasn't exactly a hub of late-night activity, and the storm had chased most folks home. I glanced at the clock. 8:47 p.m., 13 minutes until closing. My shift had been uneventful, but the unease in my chest grew with every gust of wind rattling the old building. I'd always loved this library, its creaky floors and musty scent of aging paper, but tonight it felt different, haunted almost. Then it happened. A deafening crack of thunder shook the walls, and the lights sputtered out, plunging the library into darkness. Gasps echoed from the few patrons still inside, followed by the soft shuffle of feet and the glow of phone screens flickering to life. I fumbled for the flashlight under the desk, my heart racing for reasons I couldn't name. "Everyone, stay calm," I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's just a power outage. I'll check the breaker." I grabbed the flashlight and made my way toward the back, weaving through the maze of bookshelves. The beam cut through the dark, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts. That's when I saw him. A stranger standing in the biography section, his silhouette barely discernible. He was tall, maybe my age, with a lean build and dark hair that fell messily over his forehead. His presence startled me, not because he was there, but because I hadn't noticed him all evening. How had I missed him? You okay over there?" I asked, directing the flashlight's beam toward the floor to avoid blinding him. He turned, and even in the dim light, his eyes caught me off guard, deep brown, intense, like they held a story I desperately wanted to read. "Yeah," he said softly, his voice warm with a faint accent I couldn't place. "Just didn't expect the dark." I chuckled, trying to ease the tension in my chest. "Nobody did. I'm Marcus, by the way. I work here." "Javier," he replied, stepping closer. "Javier Ruiz." His name rolled off his tongue like a melody, and I felt a strange pull, like the universe was nudging me toward him. We stood there, awkward but somehow comfortable, the storm raging outside. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, when another clap of thunder roared, and the flashlight flickered out. Darkness swallowed us whole. My breath hitched, and I heard Javier shift closer. "You still there?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rain. I nodded, then realized he couldn't see me. "Yeah, I'm here," I said, my voice shakier now. And then, without warning, I felt it. A soft, hesitant brush of lips against mine. My heart stopped. The kiss was brief, electric, and gone before I could process it. When the flashlight flickered back on, Javier was standing a foot away, his eyes wide with shock, mirroring my own. I'm so sorry," he stammered, running a hand through his hair. "I don't know why don't." I cut him off, my voice barely a whisper. My mind was reeling, but my body felt alive, like every nerve was humming. I'd never been kissed like that, never felt a spark so raw, so real. Just why? Javier looked away, his jaw tight. "I don't know. I saw you earlier behind the desk, and I don't know. Something about you." His words were halting, vulnerable, and they hit me like a tidal wave. I wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but the library's emergency lights buzzed to life, bathing us in a harsh, sterile glow. The moment shattered. "Marcus?" A voice called from the front. Mrs. Delaney, one of the regulars, sounding panicked. "The power's out, and my laptop's dead." "Coming!" I shouted back, my eyes still locked on Javier. He looked like he wanted to say something but didn't. Instead, he gave me a small, apologetic smile and slipped past me, heading for the exit. "Wait," I called, but he was already gone, swallowed by the storm. I stood there, frozen, my lips still tingling from a kiss I hadn't seen coming. Who was Javier Ruiz, and why did that fleeting moment feel like it had rewritten my entire life? The rest of the night passed in a blur. I helped the remaining patrons gather their things, locked up the library, and stepped out into the rain-soaked street. My apartment was only a few blocks away, but the walk felt endless, my mind replaying that kiss over and over. I'd known I was gay since I was 15, but growing up in Willow Creek hadn't exactly been a pride parade. I'd kept my feelings locked away, buried under late-night shifts and a carefully curated smile. That kiss, though, it was like someone had kicked open a door I'd spent years trying to keep shut. By the time I reached my tiny studio apartment, I was soaked to the bone. I dropped my keys on the counter and sank onto the couch, staring at the ceiling. Javier's face lingered in my mind. Those eyes, that voice. I didn't know him, but I needed to. Something told me this wasn't over. The next morning, I woke to the sound of my phone buzzing. A text from my coworker, "Lila, library's closed today. Storm damage. You okay?" I groaned, rubbing my eyes. The library was my sanctuary, my escape from a town that sometimes felt too small for who I was. But now it was also the place where a stranger had turned my world upside down. I spent the day restless, pacing my apartment, unable to focus. By afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my jacket and headed to the library. Storm damage be damned. The building was dark when I arrived, a closed sign taped to the door. I used my key to slip inside, telling myself I was just checking for damage. But deep down, I knew the truth. I was hoping to find some trace of Javier. The library felt different in the daylight, less haunted but still heavy with the memory of last night. I wandered to the biography section, my heart pounding. There, on the floor, was a small, folded piece of paper. I picked it up, my hands trembling as I unfolded it. A phone number, scrawled in messy handwriting, with a single word, Javier. My breath caught. Was this real? Had he left this for me? I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen. Every instinct screamed to call him, but doubt crept in. What if this was a mistake? What if he regretted that kiss as much as I was obsessing over it? I didn't call. Not yet. Instead, I tucked the paper into my pocket and left the library, the weight of possibility settling over me like the storm clouds still lingering overhead. Javier Ruiz had walked into my life for less than 5 minutes, but already I knew nothing would ever be the same. For 3 days, I carried Javier's number in my pocket like a secret I wasn't ready to share. Every time I reached for it, my heart raced, but fear stopped me cold. What if he didn't mean to leave it? What if that kiss was just a fleeting impulse, a mistake born in the dark? I, Marcus Tate, had spent years building walls around my heart, and now a stranger's kiss threatened to tear them down. Willow Creek was buzzing with post-storm recovery. The library remained closed, its ancient wiring fried by the lightning strike. I volunteered to help with cleanup, partly to stay busy, partly hoping to see Javier again. The town felt different now, like it was holding its breath, waiting for me to make a move. On the 3rd day, I caved. Sitting on my couch, the crumpled paper in my hand, I typed his number into my phone and hit call before I could overthink it. Hello. His voice was just as warm as I remembered, laced with that soft accent that made my chest tighten. I froze, my throat dry. Hi. It's Marcus. From the library. Silence stretched for a beat too long, and I panicked. You left your number, and... Marcus. He said my name like it was something precious, and my heart did a somersault. I was hoping you'd call. We talked for an hour, words tumbling out like we'd known each other forever. Javier was 26, a freelance photographer who'd moved to Willow Creek a month ago from Santa Fe. He'd been in the library that night working on a project, drawn to its quiet charm. He didn't mention the kiss, and neither did I, but it hung between us, unspoken but heavy. When he suggested meeting for coffee, I said yes before my brain could catch up. The next day, I walked into Brood Awakening, the town's only coffee shop, my nerves on edge. Javier was already there, sitting by the window, his dark hair catching the afternoon light. He wore a denim jacket, sleeves rolled up, and a shy smile that made my knees weak. Hey, he said, standing as I approached. You look nice. I laughed, self-conscious in my plain flannel and jeans. You too. We ordered coffee, black for him, latte for me, and settled into a booth. The conversation flowed easily, from favorite books to childhood dreams. Javier talked about growing up in a tight-knit Hispanic family, the pressure to follow a practical path, and how photography became his rebellion. I shared pieces of my own story, being the only black kid in a mostly white town, coming out to my mom at 16, and the quiet loneliness of keeping my true self hidden. You ever feel like you're waiting for something? Javier asked, his eyes searching mine. Like your life's on pause until I don't know? Something real happens? I nodded, my throat tight. Every day, I wanted to tell him about the kiss, how it had shaken me to my core, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I asked, why'd you move here? Willow Creek's not exactly Santa Fe. He hesitated, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. I needed a change. My ex-things ended badly. I thought a small town might help me figure out who I am without all the noise. His voice was raw, and I saw a flicker of pain in his eyes. I wanted to reach for his hand, to tell him I understood. But I didn't. Not yet. We parted with a promise to meet again, and I walked home feeling lighter than I had in years. Javier was a puzzle I wanted to solve, but doubt lingered. What did he see in me? And why couldn't I shake the fear that this, whatever it was, would end before it began? The library reopened a week later, and I threw myself into my work, hoping routine would ground me. But every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in the stacks, reminded me of that night. Lila noticed my distraction. You okay, Marcus? She asked one afternoon, her brow furrowed. You've been jumpy all week. I'm fine, I lied, shelving a book with more force than necessary. She didn't push, but her knowing look told me she wasn't fooled. That evening, as I locked up, my phone buzzed. A text from Javier. Meet me at the park? 7 p.m.? The park was a short walk from the library, a quiet stretch of green with a gazebo at its center. When I arrived, Javier was there, leaning against the railing, a camera slung around his neck. The setting sun cast a golden glow over him, and my breath caught. You brought your camera, I said, nodding at it. Yeah, he grinned. Thought I'd take some shots of the town. Maybe of you, if you're cool with it. My face heated, but I nodded, and he raised the camera, snapping a few photos. You've got a great smile, Marcus, he said, lowering the lens. It's honest. I laughed, embarrassed but flattered. We walked through the park, talking, laughing, the tension between us building with every step. At the gazebo, he stopped, his expression serious. "Marcus, about that night in the library." My heart pounded. "Yeah. I didn't plan it," he said, his voice low. "The kiss. It just happened. But I don't regret it. Do you?" I swallowed hard, the truth spilling out before I could stop it. "No. I've been thinking about it ever since." His eyes softened, and he stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Woodsy, warm. This time, when he kissed me, it wasn't fleeting. It was slow, deliberate, and it set my world on fire. Javier's kiss in the gazebo lingered on my lips for days, a quiet revolution in my heart. I, Marcus Tate, had spent so long hiding, convincing myself love was a luxury I couldn't afford in a town like Willow Creek. But Javier Ruiz, with his easy smile and fearless honesty, was dismantling every defense I'd built. We started spending more time together. Coffee dates at Brood Awakening, walks through the park, late-night texts that stretched into dawn. Javier had a way of making the ordinary feel extraordinary, like every moment was a photograph waiting to be captured. He'd point his camera at the most mundane things, a cracked sidewalk, a wilting flower, and find beauty in them. "It's all about perspective," he'd say, and I started to see myself through his lens. Not just a quiet librarian, but someone capable of being loved. But love, I learned, wasn't without complications. 2 weeks after the gazebo, I met Javier's sister, Elena, who'd driven up from Albany to visit. She was 30, sharp-witted, with the same dark eyes as Javier but none of his softness. We met at a diner, and her scrutiny made me squirm. "So, you're the guy my brother's been talking about non-stop," she said, her tone equal parts curious and protective. "You're different from his usual type." "Elena," Javier warned, his hand brushing mine under the table. But her words stung, planting seeds of doubt. Was I enough for someone like Javier, who'd lived a bigger life in Santa Fe? Someone who'd loved and lost before? Elena softened as the night went on, sharing stories of their childhood. How Javier used to sneak out to take photos of the stars. How he'd always been the dreamer in their practical family. But her earlier comment lingered, and later, when Javier walked me home, I couldn't hold it in. "What did she mean? I'm not your type?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended. Javier stopped, his expression pained. "She's just protective. My ex, Diego, he was intense, artistic, always chasing the next big thing. It was exciting until it wasn't. You're different, Marcus. You're real. You make me feel grounded." His words should have reassured me, but they didn't. I wanted to be more than an anchor, more than safe. I wanted to set his world on fire the way he did mine. "I don't want to be just the guy who's here," I said, my voice breaking. "I want to matter." "You do," he said fiercely, grabbing my hand. "You have no idea how much." He pulled me close, and for a moment, the world was just us, standing on a quiet street under a starlit sky. But doubt was a stubborn thing, and it clung to me like damp clothes after a storm. The next day, I found myself at the library, shelving books with more force than necessary. Lila caught me again, her eyes narrowing. "Okay, spill. You've been a mess lately. Is it that guy you've been seeing?" I sighed, leaning against a shelf. "His name's Javier, and yeah, it's him. But it's also me. I don't know if I'm enough for him." Lila's expression softened. "Marcus, you're enough for anyone. But you've got to believe it yourself first." Her words hit hard, echoing the truth I'd been dodging. I'd spent so long hiding who I was, afraid of judgment, that I'd forgotten how to trust my own worth. That night, Javier invited me to his apartment, a small loft above a bookstore. It was cluttered with camera gear, prints pinned to the walls, and a warmth that felt like him. We cooked dinner together, tacos, his mom's recipe, and laughed over my terrible chopping skills. But as we sat on his couch, a glass of wine in hand, the air grew heavy. "You've been quiet," he said, his thumb brushing my knuckles. "What's going on?" I took a deep breath, the words spilling out. "I'm scared, Javier. I've never felt like this before, and I keep waiting for it to fall apart. I'm just a librarian in a small town. You're this incredible person who's lived a whole life I can't even imagine. What if I'm not enough?" He set his glass down, his eyes locked on mine. "Marcus, I didn't move here looking for what I had before. I came here to find something real. And you're the realest thing I've ever known." He leaned in, kissing me softly, and for the first time, I let myself believe him. Javier's words in his loft that night were a lifeline, pulling me out of the spiral of doubt. Marcus Tate, had spent so long believing I didn't deserve a love like this, bold, unapologetic, real. But with Javier, I was starting to believe I could have it, even if the world around us wasn't always kind. Willow Creek wasn't a haven for people like us. The town was small, its heart conservative, and while I'd never faced outright hostility, I'd felt the weight of sidelong glances and whispered judgments. Javier, though, moved through the world with a quiet confidence that made me want to be braver. He'd hold my hand in public, his grip steady even when I hesitated. "Let them stare," he'd say with a grin. "They're just jealous they don't have this." But bravery came with a cost. One evening, as we left Brood Awakening, a group of guys outside the bar across the street shouted something ugly. Slurs that cut deeper than I wanted to admit. Javier's jaw tightened, but he kept walking, his hand squeezing mine. "Ignore them," he muttered, but I saw the hurt in his eyes. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the anger. Why did loving him feel like a battle sometimes? The library became our refuge, a place where we could be ourselves without the world's judgment. Javier started spending evenings there, working on his photography while I closed up. One night, he showed me a series of photos he'd taken, black and white shots of Willow Creek, capturing its beauty and its flaws. One was of me, leaning against the circulation desk, lost in thought. "You look like you're carrying the world," he said softly. "I want to help you carry it." I kissed him then, right there in the biography section where it all began. It felt like a reclaiming, a defiance of the world outside. But the world wasn't done with us. The next day, I found a note slipped under the library door, scrawled in angry red ink. "Fags don't belong here." My stomach dropped. I shoved the note in my pocket before Javier could see it, but the weight of it lingered. I didn't tell him, couldn't. He was already dealing with enough. His sister had called, warning him about their parents' disapproval of his lifestyle. I didn't want to add to his burden, but keeping it secret ate at me, and Javier noticed. "You're pulling away," he said one night, his voice heavy with worry. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I lied, but my hands shook as I shelved books. He didn't believe me, but he didn't push. Instead, he pulled me into a hug, his warmth grounding me. "I'm not going anywhere, Marcus," he whispered. "Not unless you tell me to." The note wasn't the last of it. A week later, I found graffiti on the library's back wall. More slurs, crude and hateful. I scrubbed it off before opening, my hands raw by the time I was done. But the fear was harder to erase. I started avoiding Javier, making excuses not to meet up. I told myself I was protecting him, but deep down, I was scared of what loving him might cost me. scared of what it might cost us. Lila caught me scrubbing the wall one morning, her face paling. "Marcus, this is serious. You need to tell someone, the police, Javier, someone." I shook my head, my throat tight. "I can handle it." But I couldn't. Not really. That night, Javier showed up at my apartment, his eyes blazing. "You're shutting me out," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought we were in this together." I wanted to tell him about the note, the graffiti, the fear clawing at my chest, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I kissed him, desperate to hold on to what we had. But even that felt fragile, like a photograph fading in the sun. The weight of the secret, the note, the graffiti, the fear grew heavier every day. I, Marcus Tate, had fallen in love with Javier Ruiz, but love wasn't enough to silence the hate creeping into our world. Willow Creek, once my sanctuary, felt like a minefield, and I didn't know how to protect what we had without losing myself. Javier refused to let me pull away. He showed up at the library every evening, his presence a quiet rebellion against my fear. One night, as we sat in the biography section, he took my hand. "Whatever's going on, Marcus, you don't have to face it alone." His words broke something in me, and I told him everything, the note, the graffiti, the way I'd been carrying it all to shield him. His face hardened, not with anger but with resolve. "We're stronger than this," he said. "Together." He was right, but strength didn't come easy. The next day, I reported the incidents to the police, my voice shaking as I handed over the note. The officer, a gruff man named Callahan, promised to look into it, but his tone suggested he didn't take it seriously. Still, telling someone felt like a small victory, like reclaiming a piece of myself. Javier and I decided to fight back in our own way. He proposed a photography exhibit at the library, a celebration of Willow Creek's diversity, portraits of its people, including us, unapologetically together. I hesitated, afraid of the backlash, but his passion was infectious. "Let's show them who we are," he said. "Let's make them see." We spent weeks preparing, Javier taking photos of everyone from Lila to Mrs. Delaney to the kids who came for story hour. The centerpiece was a portrait of us, laughing in the park, our hands intertwined. When the exhibit opened, the library was packed. Some faces curious, others hostile. But as people moved through the photos, something shifted. I saw tears in Mrs. Delaney's eyes, a nod of respect from Callahan. Not everyone was won over, but it was a start. The night of the exhibit, Javier pulled me aside, his eyes shining. "You did this, Marcus. You made this possible." I shook my head, my throat tight. "We did this." He kissed me, right there in front of everyone, and for the first time I didn't care who was watching. The hate didn't vanish overnight. We still got looks, whispers, the occasional cruel word. But we faced it together, and that made all the difference. Javier's photos stayed up in the library, a reminder that love could be a light in the dark. And every time I walked through those doors, I remembered that night. The power outage, the stranger's kiss, and how it changed my life forever. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was better, real, messy, human. Javier and I were building something, not just with each other but with the world around us. And in that small-town library, where a kiss in the dark had set my heart free, I learned that love wasn't just about finding someone. It was about finding the courage to be yourself no matter what.